Welcome to an episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I introduce my next guest here, I'd like to give a little plug to my channel. If you really enjoy this content, please like and subscribe down below. We greatly appreciate it. And my next guest, he is a guitarist, singer, composer of Depths of Dementia. They're a band from Denver, Colorado, Nicolas Camacho. Did I get that right, or do I have to say it again?
That's good, man.
That's good, man? Okay, good enough. So, Nicolas, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what got you into the music scene? Kind of, was there ever like a song that inspired you when you first heard it? You're like, oh my God, I got to get into music, or how did that all play out for you?
You know, music's been a huge part of my life, pretty much since I can remember. My father has been a longtime musician. He's from South America, so he plays a lot of traditional Andean folk music. So kind of just growing up around him playing music and playing in different bands. He's done a whole lot from, he did a short set of shows in Colorado with the Grateful Dead and then toured the United States. Pretty much his music took him from his home country to the United States, where he ended up meeting my mom. So I've pretty much been steeped in music my whole life.
So you were conceived in music, basically.
Basically, yeah. You know, my mom, her father, and his father's father, they've owned music stores their whole life. And after my grandpa passed away is when the music store went out of business. But he was huge in the Boulder music scene here in Colorado. So, yeah, a lot of music in my life, and here I am. But basically, at a certain point, I have two older brothers who are about 8 and 10 years older than me. And I got a huge, I guess, step up, I think, to most people. Kind of got introduced to some heavier music and more adult music a lot earlier in my life. You know, I remember being 4 or 5 and listening to tapes of, you know, there's Janis Joplin, you know, Black Sabbath, you know, Jethro Tull.
You got your baptism early.
Yeah, it happened early. Yeah. So yeah, did a whole lot of that, and then my other brother introduced me to a lot of hip hop. But what stuck with me was a lot of the really heavy music, and I think that's kind of what excited me. I think that happens to most people. At some point, you know, you see somebody playing a guitar, and you're like, "That's cool. I want to do that." So that's kind of where that started. And then I think I got my first guitar when I was 11 and kind of just went from there. But it was really when I was listening to a lot of, you know, Pantera. Dimebag Darrell inspired the hell out of me, as I'm sure he did many people my age. Dave Mustaine, you know, Megadeth was huge. You know, those are the things that kind of got me started. So I don't think there was a particular song per se, but there was definitely a sound, and it was that heavy metal sound, you know, and I'm sure that is a common story for most people in our genre.
Absolutely, yeah. For me, just listening to metal music when I was young, I'd say probably about 12 years old, I heard Master of Puppets, Metallica, and that was the one song for me where I was like, oh, holy crap, this is just a completely new, different thing. I've never heard anything like it. So that was for me. I mean, I never played music per se. I just bang the drums whenever I feel like it. I am not musically talented at all, but that is my Master of Puppets was my baptism into metal music. But when you were coming up with your band, Depths of Dementia, how'd you come up with that title? Is it did you guys just come up out of the random, or is there a story behind it? How'd that work out?
You know what? All I remember is I was probably still in middle school, and I remember we were hanging out, me and Sean, with a buddy of ours who at the time played bass, and we were like, dude, we should start a band. And at some point, I think it came out of Sean's mouth that it was Dementia, and for a long time, that's what we went by, was Dementia. And then, of course, once the internet got a lot easier to navigate, you know, you discover Encyclopedia Metallum, and then you discover that there's 100 bands called Dementia already. So
I was gonna say that's a pretty deep name. That's a pretty deep name too for a middle school band coming in.
Yeah,
coming into playing for a middle. Yeah, we're Dementia, and it's like, oh God, geez, these guys are hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, once we realized that there's already a bunch of bands called Dementia, I think I definitely pushed. I was like, we need to do something to the name, make it more unique. And I was like, let's add the depths of, it was kind of a shot in the dark. Felt like it fit the name, fit the theme. At the time, I was kind of more interested in getting into this darker realm of music. Like I'd said, I've already been playing, at this point, I'd already been playing in different black metal bands in the local Denver scene, and was really interested in making our music darker and heavier and deeper. And I was also very influenced by a lot of prog, loving, like Opeth and Gojira, who I think are huge standout influences for our music, directly anyhow. And so that all kind of fit the name, and I was like, let's just try it. It took some tug of war with my drummer, but we came eye to eye.
Those drummers, I got to tell you, I've had my share of drummers on, and those guys are a breed of their own. And I say that myself, being a guy who, out of all the instruments, I prefer playing the drums, but I'm kind of weird like that. But yeah, they're a different breed of the beast. But
yeah.
When you guys were starting out as a band, what would you say was your biggest struggle, and how'd you guys overcome it?
Biggest struggle, I mean, I think our biggest struggle, even up until this point, given that Sean and I have been playing together for so long, was really just figuring out what the hell we were doing. And honestly, it seemed to me that it worked out in our favor at this point. We went into the band not really sure how to approach the marketing side of it. You know what I mean? Like I said, we started the band when I was in middle school, Sean was in high school. We didn't really know what we were doing, kind of like had some cheesy logos and stuff like that along the way. And honestly, up until just the last year or so, really started figuring out how to market it. But that I think worked out in our favor in a way, because instead of spending all this time creating merch and stuff to sell, we were really just honing our craft, learning how to write songs, and learning how to play our instruments and play good music, at least what I think is good music. And that, I think, is our most our biggest hurdle up until this point, besides, the revolving door of bass players we've had up until just recently. But it really paid off, I think, in sort of almost like an academic way. Like we did our 10 years of med school of learning how to play our instruments, and now we can actually write decent music. So
now, being a guitarist, I've had a few guitarists on myself, and one of the questions I also like to ask them is, what was the hardest thing starting off to learn when you were playing guitar? Like, what was the one thing that really took you the longest, you think, to develop, but now you've got pretty down pat?
Jeez, man. I don't know. I really love the instrument, but I think it's one of, and it's like any skill that you develop, it sucks. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. It's never fun. It is fun. I'm speaking hyperbolically here, but it's a real pain in the ass. And eventually you figure it out. I think it took me forever to get a strong right hand and learn picking techniques and strumming techniques. And I think I remember early on not being able to figure out how the dudes in Slayer were doing that triplet run in Raining Blood. That so it was couldn't figure it out. And I remember I sat there probably for at least a solid month and just came home from school every day and just practiced that riff.
That's a straight orgasm for metal fans if I've ever known one. So I had one guy on previously who I asked the same question to, and he goes, "Yeah, the biggest struggle for me was finding a purple guitar pick. I couldn't find one." I was like, "That was your biggest struggle starting out playing guitar?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm self-taught." And I was like, "Okay, I guess if that's your biggest struggle, then I don't know." But so yeah, when you guys were kind of starting out as a band, did you guys all know what genre you wanted to play to begin with, or was there ever a discussion where you're like, I want to play heavy, and then one guy was like, oh no, I want to play more of a punk thing, or I want to play more of a pop, or did you guys always know deep down that you guys wanted to play heavy-ish type of music?
I think so. Sean, the drummer, and myself being sort of the backbone, he's always just been this like creative, I don't know, like backboard that I could spring ideas off of. Him and I kind of always had it figured out. Like we were going to play heavy music no matter what. He was always, like an animal on the drums, and I always just had an interest in the macabre and dark things. So like, it came from like early days of us just listening to music by ourselves and like, like pretending to play the instruments to like actually learning how to play the songs. And I don't think there was ever a question that we didn't want to play heavy music. I think it only came up until like later in our music writing. I think maybe when I took more of a full picture kind of like look at how I wanted to write music, that did it ever come into question. Our most recent bass player before Max, and this is already at a point in time when we've kind of established our sound, this kind of like blackened death, progressive death metal kind of thing that we're doing, that he was like, I really like these songs. They're cool, but like I have a couple songs of my own that I wanted to try out, and I'm totally open-minded, but they were all just like 4-chord punk songs. And like at the end of the day, if we've already established a sound, we can't like, I don't know. Neither of us, Sean or I, were too thrilled on that. So this is really the first time that I think it ever came into question, and now with the days of like, we were a heavy band, and I think now you can kind of maybe weasel us into like an actual corner. Mm-hmm. We are more of a progressive death metal band. There's a lot of black metal influence in our music. So
personally, where would you say the influence, the dark kind of influence to write your music comes from? Because me personally, like I like listening to dark music every once in a while. I mean, I can go there, but then I'm always thinking in the back of my head, I was like, God, if anyone I knew like walked in the room right now when I was listening to this, they probably thought I was like a serial killer or something like that. And I'll probably have to go like, nope. I just enjoy it. Where do you think personally that interest comes from?
Oh man, it's sort of sad. I've just dealt with a lot of death in my life. Mm-hmm. So much so that like, I don't think I've ever really thought of it as kind of like, hey, I need to apologize for how dark I'm being.
Yeah.
My art, I'm also a visual artist, and mm-hmm. my art's always been very dark, usually pretty gloomy. If it's not, my interpretation of like the human condition, then it's maybe even just like a little more blatant. But being surrounded in it, I lost my mom when I was 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
I've lost several friends to suicide. I myself have suffered from depression. So it's just one of those things that like, I don't really think of as like a taboo so much as like, it's part of my life. Mm-hmm. It's part of my life, and I accept it, and I sort of embrace it. And I probably embellish a little bit too much in it when I'm writing music, but, for the most part, like it's just my outlet.
Hey, and and you're doing such a positive thing with it too. You're taking stuff that's, I mean, you've been dealt a rough hand, it seems like, and you're making the most out of it and trying to make something positive out of it. So that's an unbelievable thing to do. I mean, you could be some guy who then like goes and grabs a gun and decides to like go shoot up a place, to be honest. But I mean, it's like you're doing such a positive thing with it, man, that I can't commend you enough. I mean, I've heard other people talk similar stuff where it's just a coping mechanism and they use it to kind of, help bring themselves a little bit of like closure, also helps with the healing process. So, I mean, it's
absolutely
much power to you, man. I really, really, really appreciate you talking about that type of stuff too, because like mental health is such a stigma even nowadays where people don't like to talk about it. And even like musically, there are a few people that write about it, but I mean, it's like so many people suffer from it that if even 10% of the people that really suffered from it talked about it, it wouldn't be a stigma anymore.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's just, I mean, sure. I really appreciate it. And when you're writing, because you compose a lot of the music, and do you come up with a lot of the lyrics too, or are you more of a melody guy?
I do lyrics, melody, and usually most of the song structuring. Yeah. But yeah, lyrically, I do. I would say about 90% of it. My drummer also does a solid like 10%. He chips in here and there.
Got to give the drummer a little bit of credit.
Hey, man, when he writes good lyrics, he writes
good
lyrics.
Yeah. So when you're coming up with your lyrics, What are your main influences? Do you are you one of those people who are like you hear like someone talking on the street and you're like, oh my god, that's a great sentence for like a song, or do you ever take it from like the news, which some people I've said have taken it from, or like I've used this every single time and I've had one guy that says it's partially true. You always hear that music trope like in the movies where the musician's having a dream and then he like travels some faraway place and the guy's like, this is the lyric to the greatest song ever written, like use it wisely, and then the guy wakes up, he's like, oh my god, I got the greatest song ever. Has that ever happened to you? And we've had one guy that said something similar to that happened to him, but he hasn't made it yet with that song, so I think he's lying. So
I don't think I've ever had any like prophetic vision that told me that like what I was about to write was going to be the shit.
I had one guy say he went on an acid trip and he said it didn't work, so I was like, okay, well, you know, maybe you weren't doing it right.
That's probably fair. Honestly, so much of what I write comes from really powerful things that I hear, whether it be in movies or in books. It's usually I latch on to like some phrase or some sentence that pulls at my heartstrings or like tugs at me. So a lot of our lyrics, kind of like I said, since I do write about the dark stuff, I don't necessarily like to write about like violence so much as I do prefer to write about like introspection in the human condition and you know, my own feelings. I think it's a little bit more relatable and less cartoony, but that's just me. But so I end up finding, you know, words or phrases that really stand out to me. So, I mean, I don't necessarily have one off the top of my head, but I also use a lot of pop culture.
Oh yeah.
Tons of pop culture references in my music.
Yeah.
When we started out writing songs for the band, I think like 3 of the songs that we initially wrote were all about the Evil Dead movies.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Great
and like
movies,
that kind of, that and like Tales from the Crypt.
Oh yeah.
It was an early one of our tracks. But really what it came down to is like, I love pop culture, but I'm also a fairly emotional person and kind of intertwine those two. So, you know, one of the lyrics on a song that's coming out on our next album, the song's called Float, and there's a little nod to Stephen King's It. You know, we all float down here. The lyric itself, you know, you can take it as I'm, you know, paying reference to Pennywise the Clown, but for the most part, I don't think that song has literally anything to do with the movie. It's just a really powerful phrase to me anyhow.
Absolutely. So when you're writing your songs, do you have the melody kind of already known ahead of time of what it's going to sound like in your head, or are you one of the guys where you write down the lyrics and you say, okay, let's make a melody off of those lyrics?
It's kind of the opposite way. So I usually write the music. I mean, I kind of got forced into the vocalist position. My drummer didn't want anybody else in the band for a while, and he was just like, come on, dude, it's just you and me. So he's like, you need to learn how to sing and play guitar at the same time. And I was like, you know, eventually figured it out, and then eventually started really owning my role as a vocalist. And so basically I write the music because I think of myself as a guitar player first. I do that. And then either I have had lyrics that I've already written. I usually just write when I'm on the bus or if I'm traveling somewhere. And then if I have a song that needs lyrics, I usually scour through my old writing and then try and like put pieces together, almost kind of like a Lego set, I guess.
Yeah. I asked this question to a lot of the songwriters on here, and I've had a mixed response. I think it's about half and half, but do you have the title of your song already thought up before you write the lyrics, or after the lyrics do you look at them and say like, hey, what's a good song title that I could come up with these lyrics?
I think when I have lyrics is usually when the song title comes up. I find like the part of the song that sticks out to me, or is that I think maybe the most like hooky or catchy. It happened when I was working on a song for our album, and it's a working title at the moment, but it's called Wounds. But you know, after I'd written the lyrics, I was like, I feel like this song is about emotional wounds. It's about scarring. You know what I mean? Like, let's we'll just call it wounds for the sake of, I could elaborate on that title, but I feel like, the one word that serves,
it's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah.
Serves the purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big questions that we always ask here on this podcast is, what's it like performing live? What does that mean to you? Because you're actually the 25th episode. I don't know. I'll probably have to send you a free DJ on the spot T-shirt, which I'll be dropping in a couple of weeks. I'll announce that early on that we are selling T-shirts, and I'll leave a link below once we get them. But 25th episode. 25th episode. I'll put probably like a buzzer or something on when I edit this to celebrate. Have a little siren going off. But one of the things that we like to talk about with all the guests that we've had on is performing live, what that means to a performer, the high and thrill that you get off of. People describe it as a high unlike any drug that you could ever take. They describe it as, you're slaving away at your music. You practice it a million times. It's just all about that. And then finally being able to perform it live in front of people. What does that feeling mean to you personally?
It's weird. I've been doing it for so long. So I think the first time we got on stage, I had to be at like 15, 15 or 14. And, I remember being nervous a lot. And I still get nervous, I don't think that ever really goes away. It becomes a lot more natural for sure. But I think more than anything, it's this experience of kind of being able to have somebody to give your gifts to, if that makes any sense. Like,
yep.
I think to be able to, like, at a certain point in my life, there was a sense of catharsis that came from it. Kind of like pouring out all this energy that I had and giving it to a crowd to react to. And now it's a little less, I don't know, hey, here's my feelings and like take it.
Yeah.
But now it's like, learning as a frontman and a vocalist to like engage with my audience and really like bring them in and captivate them, not only with music, but like with my energy on stage. So less of me like pouring it onto them, but more inviting them into me. And it's been an awesome, couple of years since I've really figured that out. But, like, I remember being able, I said it to my drummer and I was like, dude, this was the aha moment. I was like, I was able to, move the crowd with my own voice, my hands. And that was this sort of like, understanding of like a power, I guess. Maybe that sounds a little corny, but it's like this kind of being able to like make somebody like putty in your hands, and being able to respect that, instead of, taking advantage of it. And, the equal respect, because they're sitting there listening to your music, giving you that respect, and you are respecting them by, obviously not treating them terribly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So, how especially does that feeling mean to you, though, coming from a guy that writes most of the lyrics in the band and comes up with a lot of the melodies? Because when we talk to people about that, they always consider it kind of like their baby, because like they came up with it in their head. They're the ones that like introduced it, and then they're the ones that perform it. How especially does that feeling mean to you, coming as a guy who you're basically showing the world the stuff that you personally came up with in your head?
Yeah. I think I understand that it's a really scary process, I think, for a lot of people, because the fear of rejection is very real. And, I think for us, being a band that doesn't necessarily fit in with any of the local bands, was this like, we're here, we get it, but we're not like a pure death metal band. We're not a pure black metal band. We have some like indie rock moments in it too. And so we're not any one thing, and we're always kind of the odd man out on a bill. At least that's how it felt for a very long time. And it was this massive rejection. You know what I mean? Like, we would play a song and then just watch people walk away. And it was like heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think what really happens, though, is the more you do it, the less you really give a shit about being rejected, and you allow yourself to be vulnerable with an audience, and you give your audience your true authentic self, and then they kind of respect it a little bit more. They sit on they stand on the floor, they watch you play, they don't walk away. And that tends to be the case now, is like falling on my face several times and then learning to just accept the rejection to so much to the point where like people take it seriously now.
Yeah. What do you have any pre-show traditions? We have a lot of bands in here that like, oh, we take like 2 shots of this or something like that, or we stretch, or we all get together and do something. What is your band's tradition if you have any?
It's sort of a recent thing that we started doing maybe in the last like probably since May.
Yeah.
But just as like a good like way to get us all in sync and warm up together. We do this thing.
Jazz hands?
Jazz hands. No, we do from the John Petrucci Rock Discipline DVD. There's he works up like a major scale.
Oh yeah.
And he does it 60 beats per minute. You do it one beat or one note per 60 beats, and then or per beat rather. I'm all mushmouth. And then you do 2. So you're doing subdivisions here. So you do 2, and then you do triplets, and then you do quads, and then you do sextuplets until it's like super fast. And then we all kind of get on the same page and kind of vibe together that way. Other than that, we give each other hugs.
Yeah. I was going to say, I have a certain list of criteria that if anyone ever says it on my show, I am dropping the podcast and never broadcasting anything ever again. And one of them is if they say jazz hands is their pre-show tradition. If they go jazz hands, I'll go like, nope, we're done. We're done here. Closing the podcast, done with everything. I'm retiring. Another one you'll find out soon enough when we get to the other questions, but you won't answer that question the way that I'm thinking. But being from Minnesota, and you're from Denver, one of the things that I was really shocked to learn, I'm close to the Minneapolis area, was that there's a huge metal scene in Minneapolis. When people think about Minneapolis, they usually think about, that's where Prince came from. There's a lot of pop in that area, but I figured out that metal just dominates the area. What's the scene like in Denver, you'd say, musically?
It's funny to me because there's a huge music scene in Denver. And I'm fairly certain there's a huge music scene in most different genres. I know that we have a big hip hop scene. There's a pretty good like electronic dance music scene. There's a ton of folk, ton of like singer-songwriter, pop, stuff like that. But I'm just so close, I'm like this close to the metal scene that like it's hard to see anything else.
Yeah.
And our metal scene's huge. There's a ton of really great bands. We have a lot of national and international acts. We have Chemist, we have Havoc. Dreadnought is a national act. Blood Incantation. There's tons of dudes and ladies in Dreadnought who are doing a really amazing work, and the scene is huge and it's blowing up. Right now is a great time to be a metal musician in Denver.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's. It's kind of hard to see the rest of the music scene, even though I know it's giant and I know it's there.
Yeah. So now we're going to go to the part of the podcast that's our Inside the Actors Studio esque, where I ask you 5 questions, I tally the results, and then I think once we all agreed, once I reach the 50th episode, then I'll release those results and see who the winners are. Or not really winners, it's just who's had the most votes. I will say though, when I ask you the 3rd question, I will tell you that you cannot answer a certain answer, but I don't want to give it away soon enough. The first question. Out of all the songs that have ever been written in the history of music, what is one song that you personally wish you would come up with and why?
That's a tough question. I think if I really distilled it down to like, man, I wish I wrote that song. Probably Boys Don't Cry by The Cure.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just so simple.
Yeah.
It's 4 or 5 chords and a pretty constant beat. It's catchy and it's an earworm. It's kind of like painfully drab, but also like fun. Yeah. I don't know. It's a great song. Like,
you wouldn't know this by looking at me in the way that I kind of dress, but I like The Cure. Like Friday I'm in Love is one of my favorite songs ever. Yeah. That's probably their most commercial song, so I know I sound like a poser being like, yeah, I like their...
No, not at all.
But yeah, I definitely appreciate what they've done, and just the way that they looked and everything, they inspired kind of like a whole genre of style, too. People who like to assume like the goth or emo culture or whatever like that, a lot of it came from The Cure, so more props to them. And so our second question is, out of all the musicians that have ever lived, dead or alive, doesn't matter, you can pick either one. If you could perform one show with one musician or band, who would it be and why?
Perform a show with one band or musician. It's hard, man. I mean, I feel like if I was just to go off my last answer, it'd be cool to play a show with Robert Smith. But at the same time, I feel like I'd really want to play a show with Mike Patton.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that'd be cool. Or Paul Masvidal from Cynic.
Uh-huh.
I'd just like to play with Cynic, honestly. If
Cynic?
they ever,
All right.
if they start touring again one of these days.
I was going to say, right. We got our first down for Cynic. Okay, and now before this next question, I cannot stress enough. I'm going to ask you, out of all the concert venues on the planet, if you could play for one, where would it be and why? You cannot say Red Rocks. You are banned from saying Red Rocks because Red Rocks has been our answer 7 times out of the 25 times that I've asked this to people. It's going to win there and above. I finally caved after the last person said Red Rocks. I was like, okay, I'll finally look and see like what this Red Rocks is all about. I looked and I was like, oh, I can see why people enjoy it. It looks really, really cool. But everyone was just saying like Red Rocks, and I was like, what the hell is this Red Rocks? I was like, out of all the venues, everyone's choosing Red Rocks. But yeah, I looked it up and it's amazing. But other than Red Rocks, out of all the venues on the planet, if you were allowed to play at any venue, where would you play and why?
Where would I play and why? I don't know. I would like to play just some bigger venues outside of this country, to be perfectly honest. What's that? Japan has Budokan.
Oh,
the
yeah.
name of that
Yeah.
giant arena? Sure, I'll pick that as my answer.
That's the first Budokan that we've had, and I'm surprised.
Cool.
Me personally, Slane Castle in Ireland, if you know what that is, where they have it's a castle in Ireland where it's a castle in the backyard and they have music festivals there. It's they can fit like 40,000 people there or whatever, and it's just a beautiful scene. I highly encourage you, if you are interested, to like look it up. And a lot of artists have played there, like Red Hot Chili Peppers played a whole concert there. They have like a festival there every year. That would be my concert. It's just unbelievable. The countryside in the background is just unbelievably great. But now our fourth question.
Sounds badass.
Oh, absolutely. So my fourth question is guilty pleasure song. Guilty pleasure song that people who have known you or people who have just met you would never guess that you enjoy.
I think the easiest one for that, like shock value wise, is like I'm a huge Kesha fan. I adore Kesha. So
she has good music. I was in high school right when my freshman year was when what's the rock? Party Rock Anthem came. No, not what's it called? Don't Stop, Make It Pop, whatever that's TikTok. Yeah, that's TikTok, when that came out. Yeah, my freshman year, going into the winter of my freshman year. Yeah, that was when that whole thing came up. And yeah, Your Love Is My Drug is another good one that I like of her. She's got a lot of good songs. But out of her songs, what would your favorite be?
I still think my favorite's probably Cannibal.
Cannibal, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember like in high school, I was friends with a couple girls, and we would go out to lunch. And, at the time, like, I was kind of far up my own ass about, like, how into metal it was and how I was never into this. But every time they would play that song, and I would just sing along, like, at the top of my lungs, like, out of key and, just...
People don't realize that's...
like, mocking it.
People don't realize that's how you get girls, though. Girls enjoy that shit when you sing, like, really, really... and make fun of yourself when you're singing. I use that move, too, and it worked a few times. I mean, it's a good move that people don't get. I mean, it's like you gotta present yourself as a jackass every once in a while just to, get them to be like, oh, my God, he's not so serious. But, yeah, that's a good strategy, and I approve of what you're doing. But, Kesha, huge influence on especially people in my generation. I mean, we have had "I Want It That Way" by Backstreet Boys, so that still takes the top for the most embarrassing guilty pleasure song. We did have one guy said "Bop" when he came on, and I was like, that's a close second. Close second.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's a close second.
Yeah.
But then, lastly, guilty pleasure genre.
Guilty pleasure genre. That's hard. I feel like, especially with music, I appreciate a lot of things about a lot of music.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a good answer for that.
I'll just put down pop music because you're a Kesha fan. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do love pop music a lot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Just put that down. So, lastly, we got a few questions here. If someone came up to you, or if you got a hold of someone who said like, "Hey, I'm about to start a band," what would be the best piece of advice that you could give that person as to how to be successful as a band?
Write good music.
Yeah.
It's painful how many bands I've met over, my short time on this earth. But just aren't writing anything that's, I don't know, I guess honest. If it's not you, then why are you writing it? If you're rewriting somebody else's songs, then don't bother. Mm-hmm. We already have enough Mortician clones. We have enough like Deicide clones. We don't need any more of them. You know what I mean? Like, if you write something that feels honest and true to you, then please, like, I want to hear it, but don't reserve me somebody else's dish,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you could go back, let's say 5 years or so, or any period of time, to talk to your younger self, what advice would you give them musically in order to sort of improve? What would be the one big piece you'd give yourself?
Practice more.
Practice more. Yep.
And that's like, it's one of these things that I feel like, and maybe it's related to depression, but it's just like, I would have these like low bouts where I wouldn't practice at all. And then it'd have these like manic bouts where like I would go home and do nothing but practice. Mm-hmm. And I think it's still kind of that way. It's probably a little more evened out as I've become an adult and kind of have learned to control maybe certain mood swings. But, keep grinding, keep practicing is what I would tell my younger self.
Absolutely. I mean, once again, we really appreciate having you on and talking about those topics. I mean, it's some heavy stuff, but I mean, people got to talk about it more for it to gain more acceptance in mainstream. So now we're going to plug the ever-living crap out of Depths of Dementia. Where can people find your guys' music? Is it on iTunes? Is it on Spotify? I know you guys have a Facebook page, which I'll leave the link down below, but where else can they find your music?
Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, our Bandcamp. That's probably the best one. You can buy our merch through there too, nice. And buy our CDs. We're on every major streaming site, Tidal, all that jazz. I don't think there's a thing that you can't find us on yet, but we're there.
Yep.
And cool.
And for the two people that live in South Dakota, I got to give them a little shout. These guys are performing in South Dakota on August 23rd, I believe it was.
August 23rd, with Uada and Wormwitch and Gallo Cult.
All right, so everyone out there in South Dakota, make sure that you get tickets to go and see these guys. I mean, if you really enjoy metal music, and I really think that a lot of you guys out there do, I definitely recommend, Depths of Dementia. They got a great name, first of all, so you can't go wrong with that. Anyway, so even if you don't like their music, you can always buy their merch, because it'll be a cool thing to wear. So, I mean, it's a win-win either way. But, Nick, we really appreciate having you on, man, and you guys need anything. You guys need tour plugs. You guys need me. You definitely let me know when your next album, or your album comes out, so that I can plug that. If you guys have new singles coming out, or if you guys have any new press that you need me to do for you guys, I'd be absolutely more than willing to do it for you. I love helping out the people that we have on here. You've been a great guest, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed having you on, and you're welcome back anytime you want. Just let us know. I'll push anyone else out of the way just to have you back on. But man, I'm really grateful having you on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. So you guys, once again, lastly, Depths of Dementia, definitely go and check them out. I'll leave the links down below. And this is Ryan Johnson from DD on the Spot signing out. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, guys.